Who has the best champions? A question that is so rarely asked because, well, hardly anybody uses it, but one that I would like to try and answer anyway. Age of Empires 2 has a total of 8 infantry civilizations, including the Incas and the Slavs from AoF, which we'll be including in this video. So let's take a look at these civs and actually figure out which is best. Well, figuring out which is best is not an easy thing to do. There's so many different things and so many different units that these civilizations excel at that whilst they are all infantry civs, getting a definitive answer for this one may be quite challenging. We're going to give it a go anyway, though, and the first experiment that I wanted to do was just looking at champions. There's something that all of these civs have in common, is that they all have champions, and obviously that is the highest tier of the militia line, the standard militia line infantry in the game. So I set up a little tournament, and this is a round-robin tournament between these 8 civilizations, just matching their champions, post-imperial champions, against each other. Got some interesting results actually, and I will share the results with you. You can go underneath the video and have a look in the description. The link to the cup or the round robin tournament is on challenge.com/champ challenge. If you click on that link, you'll see all of the results and how it all panned out. Now, of the 8 infantry civilizations, 2 of them actually don't get any direct buff to their infantry. The Incas and the Teutons. These 2 civilizations don't have any changes whatsoever to their champion line, whilst the Incas do get a buff to their eagle warriors. That actually doesn't come into play here, obviously. So these 2 civilizations ended up actually coming last, and that's completely expected when all of the other civs have a direct buff to their champion line infantry. Incas and Teutons then definitely at the bottom of the pile for the champions, but this of course is only the first experiment that we're going to be looking at. So the way that the experiment actually worked was that I pitched 10 champions for each civ against 10 champions of every other civ in this list of 8 infantry civilizations. At the end of the battle, the champions that were left were counted up, and that's the points that the player got for that round. I did this 3 times for each match and basically worked out the average. Obviously you have to do it multiple times because pathfinding and stuff can also play a part in the results for each of these little battles, I suppose. So I used 10 champions for every single civilization except for the one civilization that didn't get 10, and that was the Goths. The Goths actually got 15 champions to fight with, and that is because the Goths bonus, or their infantry bonus, is slightly different in the fact that it does make their champions cheaper. So as a result, I had to give them more champions in order to make it a fair fight, in a sense. Now, the way that I did that, I got the resource value of 10 champions, and then I worked out how many champions the Goths should have in the fight, given that their champions are 35% cheaper. The answer was 15. So the Goths get to fight with 15, and as a result, the Goths came out way on top, because it just goes to show how much of an impact having more sheer numbers can make. The Goths then managing to win every single one of their fights against all of the other 7 civilizations and came out with 52 points at the end of the round robin. So the Goths are obviously a very strong civilization in this respect, and the fact that their infantry is so cheap and obviously so quick to produce thanks to their unique technology and their faster producing barracks, that is a really strong point for them, and it certainly puts them at the top in this little experiment. The second was the Japanese, and I was really unsure whether the Japanese would fall behind the Aztecs or whether the Aztecs would come above the Japanese in this situation, but the Aztecs came out on top just with 35 points, winning 6 out of the 7 matches, losing only to the Goths. The Japanese bonus attack speed is clearly very superior to the other civilizations, and the fact that they can just hammer out so much extra damage because they're getting those shots in so much faster is a huge deal, and the Japanese then well deserving of that second place. Now in third, that was the Aztecs. And the Aztecs, obviously, as we know, get an extra 4 attack damage thanks to Garland Wars, which is their unique technology. And they came third with 31 points, narrowly behind the Japanese. And they won 5 out of the 7 matches, losing obviously to the Japanese and the Goths. Now the interesting thing here was that the Japanese versus the Aztecs ended in a 5-0 victory for the Japanese, so they actually won by quite a long way, which is kind of interesting to me. The Aztecs, though, obviously aren't just known for their extra attack damage on their champions. Their main strength, I think, mostly comes with the Eagle Warriors, and that's something we'll look at a little later on in the video. But for now, Aztecs coming third is really quite respectable in this fight. In rank 4, we had the Vikings. And these guys came quite a way behind the Aztecs, actually, finishing with 23 points, winning 4 out of the 7 matches. And the Vikings are, I think, kind of interesting in this one, because that extra health is kind of a big deal when you're dealing with, archers, for instance. The tankiness there is really nice for closing the gap towards like a castle or something like that, or being more aggressive with them. But when it came to fighting against melee units, and when it came to fighting against the Aztecs, Japanese, and Goths, the Vikings just didn't stand up to much of it. And that kind of says to me that having the extra attack damage certainly outweighs having the extra HP buff. Now, in 5th position was the Slavs, and obviously, the Slavs are one of the newer civilizations in the game, and I was really unsure exactly where they would really come, but they actually performed a little worse than I expected. Now, the Slavs' main bonus here is the Druzhina upgrade, which is their unique technology, allowing the Slav champions to do trample damage to adjacent units, similar to Cataphracts with Logistica. The Slavs kind of did benefit from this technology, and it certainly did allow them to put out a little bit of extra damage. And I think, for the Slavs to take full advantage of Druzhina, they really need a lot of units, and they need them to be close together, fighting in a big, close, tight-knit ball. The way that I did the experiment, the units were more sort of spread out in a line, but the Slavs did manage to come 5th still, obviously beating the Incas, the Teutons, and the Celts, but they only finished with 9 points overall, and they didn't do too well in the long run. So in 6th position then, after the Slavs, is the Celts, and the Celts only get a very minor buff to their infantry. That is obviously the movement speed. Now obviously I did expect the Celts to do better than the Incas and Teutons, who have no direct buff to their infantry line, their champion line. But the Celts did obviously underperform, maybe, depending on how you look at it. That bonus is a very good one. The fact that their infantry moves faster is fantastic for being able to close the gap to your enemy and keep the pressure on, do a successful rush into maybe even man-at-arms. But in this situation, it didn't really make a huge difference, because obviously the fight was already taking place. There was no real walking distance to account for. They did still do better than the Incas and Teutons, like I say, and I can only put that down to the fact that their units were able to close the gap faster after defeating a champion, and they were able to keep hammering out that damage a little bit more. But it's a very minimal effect, and I think it's kind of understandable they came there in 6th position. So I thought that was kind of an interesting little setup and an interesting little round robin. I think it's certainly fair to say that the Goths have the best champions out there, simply for their cheapness. Now, obviously, you could argue that the Goths are by no means the best infantry civilization, because actually getting an answer to who's the best infantry civilization is a whole more complex matter, simply because there are so many variables between them. But for now, I think it's fair to say the Goths and the Aztecs and the Japanese are certainly up there, and I hope you enjoyed this little video. I'd love to hear your opinions as well. I mean, do you think that this round robin is a fair representation of whether or not these civs are better than one another, or do you think perhaps there would be a better way to do it? I'd like to hear what you think, but hopefully you enjoyed this video anyway. And as usual, guys, I've been Zach. I will see you next time.